Nomadic Jericho. Written by Brian Shinomiya. Narrated by Arnea Ahmetspahic. Anatu stood on a pile of rubble and sand, holding her hated poleaxe as she watched the human scavengers pick through the trash that lined the city streets. Anatu was technically a scavenger herself, but the humans didn't mind her watching over them. Anatu turned her attention to the castle that was carved into a mountain. She felt relieved, but a cloud of sadness hovered over her shoulders. Everyone lost track of just how long ago humans began mutating. Everyone feared the next mutation to rear its ugly face. Her people were the first to arrive in Jericho. She knew the city's name due to several locals who remained. Her people also claimed the castle as their settlement, and the number of her kind had grown to 50, but were outnumbered by their human counterparts, who numbered 90. She stared closely at its edgy structure and dominant presence. The humans were often around, lingering amongst Anatu's kind. Some humans even shared a liking for them, and sometimes the mutual attraction was returned. These intimate interactions, however, were often kept secret. There was a clear tension between both groups, and everyone could feel it rising each day. Anatu's race was still without a name. They hadn't accepted a title yet, but it was in the works among their leaders. Her attention turned back to the humans. Most of them disliked the fact that another race was now their overlords. Mika, one of Anatu's kind, had developed feelings for a human male, which frustrated Anatu because she had feelings for Mika. Meanwhile, Anatu was starting a relationship with Leon. Anatu had become more and more confused with herself over the past few months, being attracted to a man and several women. Anatu didn't share her liking for humans or women in general with the others. She was reserved about personal information. She stared at Mika and a human woman who was currently rifling through a burned hulk of a car. She scanned Niko from top to bottom. Niko's tight curves, fair complexion, and a blonde hair were appealing to admire. Anatu could feel herself becoming eager and hungry for attention. Niko's grungy appearance set Anatu's palms to sweat. Blood rushed through her veins. She loved a tough and rugged-looking woman. To be a scavenger meant searching through grease and junk every day of the year. It was a heavy-lifting job that many hated and couldn't do. This woman, however, was talented at what she did. She uncovered hundreds of pieces, treasures which she brought to Anatu's leaders. Anatu recognized her. She kept staring. Niko was in a perpetual state of filth and grime, whereas Leon, her partner, was trying to gain a cleaner and more put-together look while still being a knight in the settlement's army. Anatu, Damien said as he approached her from behind. She looked back. He was accompanied by her lover, Leon. "We need to expand our savaging range. The king wants you to take several others and go as far as you can," Leon said. Damien shook his head in agreement. "You too," he said to Damien. "Okay, I'll take her and that guy," Anatu said as she pointed at the human woman. Damien grunted in frustration as he had developed a taste for human women over the past several months. "Be careful," Leon said as his arm snaked around her waist. Niko noticed Anatu's gesture. They locked eyes briefly. Anatu turned back to Leon. "Leon, She tried to voice her feelings for Niko. She knew he deserved to know, but she was too embarrassed to speak the words. "Leon, I can handle myself." She smiled as he kissed her just before she walked down to her two scavengers. "One more thing before I forget. I know you dislike surprises, but we recently had a new soldier join our ranks. He's one of our kind. However, he is a bit strange, even by our standards. He hasn't said much since he's arrived, only his name and a couple of more things." Leon quickly added, stopping Anatu in her tracks. So you're telling me that I have to drag along a complete newbie who also just so happens to be mute. How nice of you, Leon. You didn't have to give me our anniversary gift this early on. Anatu scoffed sarcastically. She loved her kind, but she hated being paired up with people who she couldn't trust. Trusting the brother or sister next to you was the only way of surviving the ruins, festering with bandits and mutants. New blood meant danger for the entire party. You gotta be nice, Anatu. Give him a chance. Besides, I never said anything about his combat capabilities. You know just how scary our kind can be when push comes to shove. There's a reason why humans always glare at us with a mix of respect and terror. Leon said, smiling, trying to brighten up the mood. Anatu was just about to ask more about the newcomer when a soldier approached her from behind. She was just about to turn around and scold him for sneaking up on her when he moved in front of her with such speed that her eye could barely track it. What was that just now? Who the hell are you? Anatu spoke out, her voice seeping with confusion and questions. My name is Miltos. I'm the newcomer that got assigned to you. I would appreciate it if you didn't ask me any unnecessary questions. If you do so, I won't answer unless it's a life-threatening matter. Thanks. Miltos said without a care in his voice before walking off to join the scavenging party. Anatu's eyes followed him, scanning him up and down. Soon, she noticed that his weapons of choice were two short daggers, both resting in their leather sheaths. It was the first time Anatu encountered one of her race that opted for these short blades as their main weapon. Usually, everybody she knew chose something that had a better reach. Short blades meant getting close and personal with the worst dance partners known to any living race, mutants. That wasn't the only thing that caught her attention. Around his waist was a belt fully decorated with throwing knives, all of them glinting with perfection. Miltos might have been new to the group, but he sure looked like he could handle himself. Well, one thing is for certain, you weren't lying about his combat capabilities. It almost makes me jealous just how prepared he is. Anatu said, rolling her eyes before departing with Leon. He may give you one of his throwing knives if you ask nicely. Leon jokingly yelled out just as Anatu was leaving. Instead of answering, she gave him a sarcastic smile, the one that he loved so much. Anatu grabbed some supplies and walked down to Niko, who gave her so many mixed feelings. She was struggling to understand how to approach her hectic feelings, to round them all up, and understand if she really does love this human as well. Anatu didn't even know her name yet, and she decided to change that right then and there. Her heart was beating out of her chest, palms sweatier than ever, but she wasn't gonna chicken out this time. What is your name, human? Anatu asked in such an awkward fashion. Niko's face changed. She couldn't believe that Anatu was so bad at interacting with humans. Excuse me? Niko asked, confused beyond belief. Your name? What is your name? Anatu looked away as she asked again, her face as red as a ripe apple. As much as Anatu wanted to sound savvy and confident, it never happened that way. Fighting and slaughtering creatures was way easier than dealing with emotions. Oh, my name. I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. My name is Niko. Nice to meet you. What about you? If I recall correctly, you are called Anatu and you're one of the special ones. Niko said as a huge smile formed on her face. The special ones? Anatu asked, curious by what Niko meant. She was always uncertain when it came to humans. Some of them hated her kind, while the others cherished them as if they were gods. Slaying mutants had its perks. Defending humans who could do nothing but scavenge and hope they didn't get shredded into pieces by the roaming monstrosities. Well, you know, you are green, Which is awesome, and you are a fantastic warrior, or so I'm told, Niko said. Anatu was watching her mouth move as the words left it. Your race is pretty badass when you think about it. You tear those monsters apart with nothing more than a sword or any other weapon of choice. If you ask me, that's incredible, Niko explained, sounding like she just met her favorite person in the world. Anatu didn't know how to feel. She never felt so confused and happy at the same time. She was used to the humans being petrified of her kind, yet this woman loved everything about her. Well, thank you, Anatu mumbled out, trying to be nice in return. Niko smiled at her. Oh, and I almost forgot, we need to go further out. That's why we are going out as a well-prepared group, Anatu said. Niko's smile suddenly faded. Don't worry, we're going to that building just over there, Anatu said in a calm voice, pointing to a large structure mostly demolished by time. Niko hesitantly picked up her bag as Anatu motioned to the male scavengers to join them. She wanted to find out why she had romantic feelings for this woman, but she knew it would be hard to figure out. Her ability to fight mutants was a lot easier than talking to someone you might love. It was a harder fight to win. Have you found anything good? Anatu asked as they walked side by side. No, everything is gone, Niko said. Her soft voice sent a warm shiver down Anatu's spine. Have you found a partner? Anatu asked sheepishly, trying to say it quietly so the men wouldn't hear. No, please keep the younger of your kind away from me, especially Damien, she replied. I can't blame them for wanting you. Anatu's face burned with embarrassment at her comment. The human woman looked at Anatu, surprised and intrigued. Make sure you guys find something good, Anatu said as she took up a guard position. The landscape was bare and still. It felt the same as all the other places on Earth, but this place was different. It was home. Leon constantly talked of their children growing up here. It was no secret that they needed to bolster their numbers and create a new generation. Maybe Leon might like this human, Anatu thought as she tried to form a plan. You look lost in thought, Niko said and approached Anatu, snapping her out of a daydream. She was caught off guard and forced to fight off the worst mutant ever, her feelings. Well, it's kind of hard not to be when I'm approached by such a fierce enemy such as yourself, Anatu said, trying her best to sound confident. I see you're getting bolder and bolder by the minute. I can't say I don't like it. How about we get to know each other more while the others scavenge through whatever's left in the racks, Niko said. Her voice had a faint touch of sadness in it, despite her trying to sound seductive. She leaned against a wall, laying her head onto Anatu's shoulder before letting out a long, stress-filled sigh. Without Anatu even asking what was wrong, Niko started talking about her life and what led to the position she is in now. You see, before all of this, I had a family. Not in the kids or partner type of way, but 2 sisters and 1 brother. We tried our best to stay together and watch out for each other, but you can only have so much order in a chaotic world such as this one. My brother found the love of his life, as he calls her, and just after he got married, he left us, promising that he would return one day. He never did, and to this day, I still don't know if he's alive. Soon after he departed from us, my mother and father caught some sort of deadly illness, and there was nothing my sisters or I could do. We just watched in desperation as life slowly withered away from our parents. It was horrible to witness something like that. I mean, we really tried everything. Herbs, medications, any food we could find went to them. But in the end, our efforts were met with a catastrophic failure. Anatu was watching Niko explain her history. They passed away a few weeks later. At that point, our living conditions were minimal and hopeless. We barely had the means to give them a proper ceremony and a burial they deserved. Niko explained as her eyes filled with tears. Anatu shifted a little closer to Niko for comfort. Niko's hands quickly clung to Anatu's hands. Gosh, you must be wondering why I'm telling you all of this out of nowhere. You must think I'm crazy, spilling my soul out in front of a stranger. Honestly, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I barely talked to anyone back at camp. None of them interest me. However, you are different. I see the way you always look at me. I figure you must care to find out more about me and who I am or why I always look the way I do, dirty and rugged, Niko said. Anatu could feel her heart beginning to beat faster. She thought Niko never noticed her wandering looks. Now, Anatu felt exposed. Even though I bet you like the fact that I get down and dirty with my scavenge work. Niko let out a desperate chuckle as she wiped her tears away. Anatu didn't know what to say. She was speechless beyond belief. Even the worst mutants she faced didn't cause her to lose herself this much. She felt for Niko. All she wanted to do was help her somehow, make her feel better despite her god-awful past. Anywho, I wish I could tell you that my parents' deaths caused me and my sisters to rally together and become even stronger in the face of danger and famine. But alas, things turned for the worst very fast. My youngest sister Nola soon lost her mind due to the loss of our parents. She started spouting about monsters and ghosts, telling us that we were possessed by demons and that our parents dying was our fault, and that we needed to repent before God for the sins we've committed. The poor girl was only 20 years old when she lost her life to a bone-chilling monster. She ran out in the middle of the night with a Bible in her hand, swinging it around as if it was some sort of weapon. It didn't take long before a mutant spotted her, snatching her away within seconds. We never found her body. After that, my middle sister Nicoletta and my oldest Lola decided that they were going to join the resistance. They wanted to train to become warriors to repel these monsters. I disagreed with their decision, claiming it was suicidal to even think about fighting these things. They didn't like that much, so we ended up getting separated. I wished them all the best, and, well, here I am now, pouring my soul out to a race that I didn't even know existed till recently. So anyways, how's your life? Niko let out a laugh full of sorrow and sarcasm, probably the only defense mechanism she had left in her. Upon hearing all of this, Anatu did something that she hasn't done in years. She let her feelings free for just a couple of seconds, letting some tears fall to the floor before she hastily wiped them away. She gave Niko a long and passionate hug, also something she never does. Whatever she was feeling for her moments ago became a million times stronger after she heard her life story. She couldn't believe the suffering this woman went through before stumbling upon her. All of those nights spent alone, wondering if her siblings were still alive. It was unbearable to even think about. Anatu's heart was threatening to burst out of her chest, but she didn't care. She continued embracing Niko, showing her that she isn't alone in this world. All of these feelings were completely new to Anatu, but she was confident in herself that this was the one moment to embrace every single one of them, even if they scared her. Well, look at you. Aren't you one big softie, even for a heartless warrior such as yourself? Go on now, we need to get moving, Niko said, giving Anatu a subtle forehead kiss before going back to the scavengers as if nothing happened. Anatu watched her walk away. At that point, Anatu knew that she wanted to have this magnificent woman by her side, that she loved her a little more than just a friend, a little too much. Anatu walked back to the humans, watching the two of them rummage through piles of metal and trash, while laughing at what they found, occasionally showing each other their prized finds and trying to outdo each other. Niko kept casting glances at Anatu. There was a slow liking beginning to form between them. Suddenly, the man stood up and stared to the east. Anatu followed his glance. She spotted the cause of his concern, a creature lurking in the distance. "Get inside," Anatu quickly ordered as she entered the building. She scanned the room to make sure it was safe for the humans. She rushed over and grabbed Niko's hand. "Come on," she yelled, pulling her into the building. She realized her intimate action and quickly let go. Anatu looked over and realized that the man was holding a sword. How is everyone else finding swords? Anatu glared at his weapon. They watched as the creature drew closer and closer, seemingly searching for food. It was a new monster, with long, thin legs and arms. With a short torso and a hunched posture, it was still too far away to get a good view of the creature as it turned and walked away from them. The man began wandering around the building looking for food, and Niko remained with Anatu. Her hands slowly moved to Anatu's back. Anatu suddenly realized her touch. She turned around. The two cast curious glances at each other. The air was thick, and with the anticipation of what would happen next, heat was beginning to rise. Niko was standing behind Anatu, her chest rapidly moving up and down, visibly distraught and afraid for her safety. Her chocolate-brown eyes looked around the building, making sure that nothing was going to hurt her. Niko's dirty blonde hair caught Anatu's attention more than anything. She couldn't resist the urge to stare at the strands of dusty hair with specks of dirt decorating it like a cherry on a cake. Despite others thinking that such an appearance for a woman was distasteful and unpleasant to look at, Anatu was strangely impressed by it, more so than she could explain to herself. Dirty hair and a sweaty face meant the person was a survivor, going through the thick of it only to come up on top, kicking and breathing, or so Anatu thought. Anatu's heart was beating out of her chest, the feelings of confusion coursing through her hazy mind. Could she love a woman, or was it perhaps just her brain playing tricks on her? As she was lost in thought, Niko came closer to her. A few steps were all that was separating her and Anatu from embracing each other. She was still visibly afraid, but her eyes were glued to Anatu, almost as if she was seeking shelter in her, the unyielding feeling of protection Anatu's skills would provide. Soon, Niko's arms found their way to Anatu's waist, carefully testing out the waters, seeing just how far she could explore before she was stopped. To Niko's surprise, Anatu didn't do anything, her body as frozen as the deer in the headlights. Anatu could face any monster, mutant or abomination, but facing her emotions, let alone understanding them, was a task far harder than anything before. She'd rather take a fresh wound than face the idea of battling her confusing thoughts. We will wait a few minutes, then head back, Anatu said as they stared at each other. Will we make it? Niko asked. They were now standing inches away from each other. Anatu paused at the thought of kissing her. She looked at Niko's wet lips and took a deep breath. I think we should go back, Anatu said. Niko stepped towards Anatu and removed her casa, letting it fall to the floor. It's always a possibility we won't, Anatu said a moment before their lips met. She fought the urge to let her knees buckle and she moaned into Niko's mouth as she worked Anatu's mouth open to let their tongues play. Anatu grabbed Niko's waist and pulled her in tightly. They opened their eyes at the same time while their lips were locked. Suddenly, they both broke off the kiss, wiping saliva from their mouths and staring at each other shocked. The random romantic embrace with a woman didn't feel at all wrong to Anatu, and she could tell that Niko felt the same way. I didn't expect that, Anatu said, looking at her. Me neither. You know, my partners usually take me out to dinner before making the first move. She laughed out, making Anatu even more embarrassed. Well, I could offer you a cockroach we found earlier. I hear they are plump and crunchy this time of year, Anatu replied, getting her confidence back by the minute. Niko grabbed Anatu's face and said, "Look at you, trying to be all cute and funny. I could just gobble you up like a snack." They quickly went back to what they started just seconds ago, embracing each other again and sharing another passionate kiss, and letting their tongues furiously swirl in each other's mouths. Panting from the kiss, they both stopped. "We can't do this now," Anatu said, looking around, making sure the mutant wasn't sneaking up on them. "Whatever you want," Niko replied. "Find me later," Anatu said. "With pleasure, my dear," Niko said, winking at her before she left. Anatu picked up her hat and put it back on before she rushed out. Anatu was bursting with excitement as she looked out over the landscape, replaying what had just happened in her head. The creature was gone, but she still didn't feel it was safe to move. She couldn't keep her mind off Niko's soft touch, and kissing her felt as good as kissing Leon, maybe even better, but slightly strange. It was like a lightning bolt struck her chest, and every passionate emotion filled the empty hole in her gut. She felt alive. All her life, humans had hated her, yet one now was passionately embracing her. Time was slowly running out. They had to return to the castle. Anatu stepped outside, cautiously looking around for any potential enemies. Mutants have been known to slither around in the shadows. They'll patiently wait to pounce when no one pays attention. Depending on the mutant itself, some of them would just grab the victim and run away, dragging them back to their lair so they could feed their young. On the other hand, some mutants loved tearing apart bodies as soon as they grabbed a hold of them, snapping limbs in half as if they were twigs. She knew that she had to be on high alert. Her failing would mean Niko getting hurt, and she couldn't let that happen. She couldn't bear the thought of her newly found love getting hurt or even getting killed, which would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Snap out of it," Anatu suddenly heard a demanding voice that once again caught her off guard, just like before they left. It was Miltos, standing next to her. She completely forgot that he was part of the scavenging mission. She was just about to answer when he just walked back to the humans, keeping an eye on them, making sure that no one runs out in panic. "You are so strange." Leon wasn't lying when he said you are weird even for our standards. Anatu skittered out, but Miltos, of course, didn't say anything back. He didn't even acknowledge that she existed. Anatu took a deep breath before giving the outside world one more look. It was time for them to move out. She motioned for the scavengers to follow her. They hastily made their way back to the castle. The humans were in front of her as they ran, drawing closer and closer to the castle, when Anatu was suddenly grabbed from behind by a powerful hand and thrown back, rolling along the ground before sliding into a rock. She found herself looking up at a horrific sight, a yellowish, tan-skinned monster with milky eyes and a wide grin filled with hundreds of small, human-like teeth. Its grip was so strong that she could practically feel her bones getting crushed beneath its weight, smelling of rot and decay, spoiled flesh, and withered away bones. Simply put, if death had a smell, it would be this. Anatu could tell that the monster was happy about catching her, clicking its teeth together, licking its lips as if it was getting ready to chomp her head off any second. She knew that if she didn't free herself, somehow this would be the end. Millions of thoughts were rushing through her head. She didn't want to die like this, especially not while Niko was watching. Anatu struggled to escape the monster, but was thrown toward the human scavengers. She watched as they passed under her before she painfully hit the earth. She heard men yelling around her as she tried to get up. She could feel the monster's saliva drip onto her neck. The monster was getting ready to eat her, or even worse, disable her by biting off one of her limbs before taking her away to its lair. She closed her eyes, hoping for a miracle. To her surprise, she heard the monster roar out in pain as if something hurt it. She turned around to see something she will remember for the rest of her warrior days. Miltos, as fast as the light, had stabbed the monster with both of his daggers, aiming right for the eyes and blinding it on spot. He barely even broke a sweat, making all of it seem like another daily routine for him. He pulled the daggers out, only to stab them back in multiple times. He did this with such speed that Anatu wasn't sure what she was seeing. From being thrown so far up in the air, Miltos' fast skills were blurry. The monster continued to scream, effortlessly attempting to fend itself off from Miltos. Sadly for it, he was far too experienced, almost mocking the mutant for its lack of power to do anything. That's when the men from the castle decided to provide extra manpower, shooting fire arrows at the mutant, setting it on fire within seconds. Anatu watched as the monster slowly lost all of its power, falling dead on the ground into the puddle of its blood. I remember you saying something about a newbie. You should introduce me to this newbie someday. Maybe he and I have something in common, Miltos said as he reached out for Anatu's hand, helping her up. Now go on, you have a human that's particularly interested in seeing you alive, he continued as he led Anatu into the castle. A group of awaiting knights quickly came to her, checking if she was well or unhurt. To their surprise, she was just ruffled up. Nothing was broken or rendered useless. She was lucky. If it wasn't for Miltos, things could have gone very differently. Suddenly, the door creaked open and Leon entered. Lost my poleaxe, she huffled. That human woman is desperate to see you, he replied. Are you okay? He asked. I'm fine. Where is she? Anatu replied. Even with the red hue of his vision, he caught the blush on her cheeks. I think I know what happened, he said. Anatu pulled the blanket over her head. Leon walked over to her and sat on the floor. Did you ever have feelings for me? He asked. Yes, and I still do, she said, sitting up. Leon's eyes were fixated on her. But I like her too, Anatu added. Leon thought for a moment. All right, he said as he paced around the room. Anatu could feel his thoughts roaming about. So, you'd like 2 partners? He asked. Anatu wasn't sure what to say. She struggled to think of a response. She could care for our child, Anatu blurted out. But I want you to. I want to see you caring for my child, but instead you would be romantic with her, Leon said as the door opened. Would you want to have children with 2 women? Anatu asked and immediately wished she hadn't upon seeing Niko in the room. Leon followed her gaze. He thought for a moment. Many people have multiple partners, but you will be my favorite, Anatu, Leon said, looking at Anatu. After a long moment, he knelt to kiss her. I have to go to the rampart. Get well, but don't rush back to your duties, he said before leaving. Niko hastily rushed to Anatu, her eyes filled with tears. Anatu could tell that Niko was scared beyond belief. This was the first time she saw someone care about her this much. Niko's arms wrapped around Anatu, hugging her all over, making sure that she was all right. I thought I lost you. Don't you ever do that again. Please, Anatu, Niko said, practically screaming at Anatu, shaking like a twig in the wind. Anatu made sure to brush her tears away, slowly caressing her, showing her that she was alive and well. They were quick to embrace each other, locking their lips with another passionate kiss. I was afraid that was the last I'd ever see of you. You have no idea how horrifying that looked from my perspective, she said. Oh, really? Did it? Imagine my perspective, because I would gladly trade with yours. Anatu laughed. Jokes aside, I won't leave you, ever. Anatu pulled in Niko for another kiss. She didn't harbor any ill will towards Leon. She knew she had mixed emotions for humans, but he did not hate them. It was an innocent unliking. She still loved a strong man who was a challenge to change, to mold into just how she wanted. Anatu looked into Niko's ocean-like eyes. I've always had the urge to tell you how I feel about you, but I was too afraid to, Anatu said. Me too, but today you made me realize just how fragile our lives are. We could die at any given moment, and we might as well make the most out of it while we're still alive, Niko explained. And those things are so awful that I have no idea how you dare to fight them head on. They smiled at each other. Stay here, Anatu said. Niko got under the covers and lay under the blanket blushing. They both giggled, holding each other's hands as their fingers interlocked and their clothes were strewn around the room. So, are you going to take care of me? Anatu asked. I will take care of you, your children, and that man that is always around you. Leon, was it? I think so. I think we're gonna make one great family, all of us protecting each other and being there for each other. Something I haven't felt in a very, very long time, since I lost all of my family. Niko said, suddenly turning sour with a subtle frown forming on her beautiful face. I don't ever want to hear you say things like that again. You have us now. You'll never be alone again, and we may even find your siblings one day. Regardless, Leon and I will be around you every day, making sure that you feel safe and loved just as you deserve. No more hiding our feelings. If there is something I'm certain about, it's having a fantastic family with you, Anatu preached, making Niko feel better. She gave Niko a smile before kissing her again. Anatu was slightly concerned how Leon would feel about sharing their room and bed with Niko, but Anatu was determined to move her into their life. She was afraid someone else would snatch this irresistible woman up. She loved how alive this human made her feel and knew the sensation of having her and Leon would make her feel superhuman. You're beautiful, Anatu said, running her fingers through Niko's hair. Anatu's face was as red as a sunburned human. Her and her new lover Niko paraded in more unmentionable things. The pair couldn't help but giggle every time they looked at each other. They shared one more passionate kiss before parting ways. Anatu left to find Leon and told Niko to retrieve her belongings and move them into their room. Despite feeling as though every bone would break with every step she took, Anatu was in good spirits. It was a struggle to make it down the hall and up the stairs to the ramparts. Leon was nowhere to be seen. It was an agonizing search, but she finally found him scanning the desolate sandy field under the night sky. I thought I was going to lose you to that monster or that human woman, he said. Well, the humans lost her to us, she laughed. He glanced at her. I told Niko to move in with us. Anatu blurted out. Leon turned away, a complete loss of words. He knew that it took him 2 months before Anatu agreed to move in with him. She quickly kissed him so he wouldn't protest. Anatu knew he needed space. She was quick to leave the ramparts before she was put on guard duty. She needed to lie down again. By the time Anatu made it to her room, Niko was unrolling her bed mat next to Leon's and hers. Niko didn't have much in terms of belongings, just some clothes. How does your partner feel about this? Niko asked upon realizing Anatu entered the room. He'll come to enjoy 2 women, Anatu replied, blushing as she pushed her new partner down, pinning her to the floor to shower her with kiss after kiss. Sleep was an unwelcome commodity, but not as unwelcoming as the morning sun streaming in through the window. As Anatu opened her eyes, she felt Niko's arm draped over her along with Leon's. She smiled at the thought of his reaction upon seeing what awaited him in their room. Anatu and Niko snuggled up together. Anatu groaned as she set to the task of starting a cooking fire. She hated cooking almost as much as Leon hated eating her cooking. She was the only person who could turn the outside of meat into charcoal while the inside was still raw. Anatu looked at their food. All they had was oatmeal, the one thing she could not master cooking. She always made it too gooey. "I love to cook," a sleepy voice said from behind her. "Then go take over before Anatu serves us shit and disappointment," Leon said, sounding exhausted. Niko laughed and quickly got up to save Anatu. It seemed already the three were off to a perfect start.